What is up, everyone? So, if you haven't noticed already, it's a little bit more darker in here because it is sort of snowing outside, and I don't know how the world works anymore. I just don't. You know, it's just too confusing. But I wanted to talk about the fact that like if you ever like go into my much older videos and things like that, then you will know that I love going to anime conventions. And one of the big things about going to an anime, like I could literally talk about all my experiences of going to an anime convention and what I recommend people do and don't do and stuff like that. But that's not what this is about. This is about my love for fiction. I love fiction, and like in my 100 facts video, I basically talk about how I was a TV kid, and it's not necessarily that I used to watch a lot of television. It was the fact that I wanted to watch a lot of television. I wanted to I wanted to indulge into as much fiction as possible, and one of the big things was that growing up in my household, there was this big um, anti agenda, so to speak, about just sitting in front of TV and watching TV all day. It was like you had to be active, you had to be outside, you had to, be running around. It was ultimately, basically, just like, I mean, it was basically this big push towards like just being active and things. And honestly, if the area that we lived in was much more safe, I would have been out a lot more. I would have probably like not really cared about television that much, but the area that I lived in wasn't safe. The safest thing I could do was watch television, ironically. And they were like, no, we don't want you doing that too often. So I would watch bits and pieces of television at least weekly. And, you know, I found myself really enjoying, really appreciate, like, I equate my times of peace with watching TV shows. Parenthood, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Sesame Street, Barney, and things like that. But I always knew that I was a big fan of fiction. And back then, I was a child, so clearly I was really interested in the colors, the lights, the sounds, things like that. But when I learned how to read, that was when I started to care more about what message was being presented to me. Like there was always like one thing I loved about Barney was that like growing up bullied, he at the end of every episode Barney would be like, and remember, I love you. It's like, you have any idea like how touching that is to be a kid who thinks everybody hate you just to know that this big imaginary purple dinosaur doesn't. It's just, people don't like Barney. I don't understand that, but I loved being loved, and I still do. But I think the thing that really sort of like ensnares me into fiction is that I feel like it's kind of juvenile to just sort of like look at fiction and be like, oh, this thing looks good, so I like it because it looks good. When there's especially something out there that's ultimately like there's a message that writers are trying to present. No matter what it is, there's a message in everything. So, like for example, Superman is ultimately, if you really look into it, it's a story about immigration and how not every immigrant is a terrible person, and some of them can actually do a mound of good. Also, it really says a lot about like Metropolis, because like they could have easily just pushed this agenda like Superman is from another country and he's from another planet. He's gonna come down here and kill us all one day, and we should be afraid of him. Blah, 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 blah. Like I don't know if they ever did that, but they could have, and it could have, and it would have worked. I think that's essentially what Lex Luthor is. I don't know. Um, but like there's a lot of messages. There's a lot of things that writers want us to see, understand, and I feel like these messages are what kind of got me into fiction in general. Like there's a lot of stories out there that basically just say you believe in yourself, trust in your own abilities, work hard and move forward, stuff like that, and like no matter, being religious is not a terrible thing. It's what you do with religion. If I'm not mistaken, that's kind of what Hunchback of Notre Dame was sort of about. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into fiction that for me is never just, oh, this is just kid stuff, and blah, blah, blah. Like there's levels to this stuff, man. Like if you look back, Rugrats was ridiculously progressive for just a kids show. They promoted they promoted nudity. Nikki is Nikki. You know, there's even a part up in there where boys wanted to wear dressies, and they did. Nobody freaked out about it. Shoot. It's just like that's the thing that kind of got me into fiction. It was just the agenda, not agenda. I don't want to say agenda, but it's just there's messages in there that you just have to sort of get, and you know it sort of introduced me to new ways to see things. Because when you're growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, surrounded by all of this, surrounded by crime, violence, angry people just being mad about everything, you sort of see things only one way, and then you get introduced to these new concepts and these new things, and suddenly everything just starts to look a little bit different. You start to find yourself questioning things that people get upset about. It's like watching TV and just indulging in fiction made me start asking why a lot more. And another thing too is that I believe that there's a little bit of truth in all fiction. Because there's so much that we don't know about, the universe, water, flora, fauna, technology. We don't know that much. We barely scratch the surface of most things that we claim to know. So it's like, for all we know, stuff in this series, stuff in this comic book, stuff in this book could be just an inkling bit realistic. I mean, who's to say? What if there is a planet Krypton out there? We don't know. We haven't really been that far out in space yet. It's just it's really easy to kind of just sort of shrug fiction off as this this just stories. But art has motivated life, and art has motivated life to do a lot of things. At one point in time, the cell phone that we have right now was something that somebody just wrote into a story. At one point in time, video calls used to be, holodecks in science fiction films. At one time, cars was probably just, somebody's little pipe dream. It's just, fiction is ultimately people writing about reality with their own special little tweaks in it. And I feel like some of those special little tweaks can be pushed and can be accelerated into real life because it's been done before multiple times. So and that's another thing too about that's my take into fiction. It's I know I sound like a crazy person, but it's just that it's not. I feel like it's not impossible. I feel like fiction isn't completely fictional, and that's cool. Because fiction introduces you to a lot of cool stuff that can be possible. I mean, if you really think about it, Iron Man is just a dude who's just really smart, right? So, take a fashion designer, teach them some, mechanical engineering or just engineering in general, and they could make a super suit. It's not impossible to create a giant robot. It's just probably ridiculously expensive. It's not impossible to establish a space colony. It's probably just really complicated to do, And I feel like, with the denial of education in America, I feel like the denial of education in America, as far as on a borderline politically national scale, is sort of what's motivating and stifling these not motivating, demotivating, and stifling these things into just pipe dreams. And it's not impossible. It's like, the fact that I can make a video on the internet that could like be put on a website and seen almost all across the world if people in the world wanted to see it. That was at one time a work of fiction. I'm just saying. So yeah, fiction is cool. There's deeper meanings to things though. It's like, what if? Fiction motivated me to ask what if, and I never got tired of asking what if. But that's just what it is though. I just it's cool. The world can be so much cooler if we use our imaginations more, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with this, but that's what I wanted to talk about. I truly do enjoy fiction, and I hope I made sense. That's it. Love and peace. Podcast episode link below. Feel free to give that a listen if you want. Yeah.